All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm joined with MMA journalist Patrick McCory. How are you?
Doing well, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Obviously, you've done work with Combat Sports UK and now Cage Side Press. How was that like, work with those?
It's really great, man. Honestly, I recommend for everyone trying to get into this space to find a company to work with, whether it be one or whether it be multiple, just to help get your name out there a little bit more. And sometimes managers won't want to give interviews to a personal channel like mine. I've experienced that. But if you say you're from Combat Sports UK or you say you're from Cage Side Press, they're more likely to give that because that's an actual organization and opportunities will arise easier for you, like media days.
You talk about doing interviews for your own channel. One of the athletes you got to interview was Paddy the Baddy. What was he like to talk to?
Patty was great, man. When I originally messaged him about an interview, that was before his debut. I didn't expect to get a reply because he was so massive. But
Yeah.
when I did get the reply, I was like, oh, cool. And I figured, all right, that's a one-off thing. And then before his second fight versus Kazula Vargas, I was like, all right, try again. And he had just got suspended on Twitter. So this was his second Twitter account. And he replied again and did the interview. And that's my most viewed interview. And then he got suspended on Twitter again. So I have no way of messaging him now, but I'm super thankful of having the two opportunities that I did have.
What do you think about Paddy saying someone like Ariel Hawani or other interviewers have to pay him now to do interviews?
Never had that issue with him. I think maybe it was taken a little bit out of context. I think a lot of fighters don't really like Helwani, and I like Helwani. I'm not burning any bridges, but so I think maybe it was a little bit of frustration, especially Paddy being in the same area as Dana. Dana doesn't like Helwani either, so I think that was part of him bashing him. But Helwani, he's really smart, and he pulled out the receipts, as he said. He pulled out everything with the paying for an interview. I've experienced that too. I'm not going to throw out any names, but I remember I messaged the fighter, and they said it's a minute for every minute. It's $10, and I was like, all right, no, thank you.
What do you think about athletes paying for interviews? Do you not think it's a chance for them to get their name out there and grow their brand?
So when it comes to paying for interviews, I always say, just get the free ones. That's a big deal. But if there's the opportunity to get Conor McGregor or someone that big, yeah, I would look at paying. But then you have to think about the price and how much you do want to pay because it is a crazy amount of money. That's like for Conor, right? You're probably going to be paying a decent amount of money. And so you have to weigh the pros and cons. Is it worth it? Your name's going to get out there more. And with the Conor McGregor interview, and even with Paddy Pimblett, like that's going to get posted. That's going to get on Twitter. That's going to get on YouTube. It's going to get on TikTok. So you have to weigh, is this money that I'm going to spend on this interview worth it to get the publicity?
When you do interviews, is it looking at what would go viral on maybe TikTok, on Twitter, with other MMA accounts tweeting about it?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you think when you go do interviews, you try to get like some viral clips that maybe will go viral on TikTok? Some MMA news organizations will repost it on Twitter.
So I do maybe ask you a question or two that maybe could get a more clippable answer, or maybe there's a fighter that maybe will give you a better answer for a question. But it's about how you ask it. Normally, I do not ask for that, and it just kind of happens. But that also comes with the smart questions. And if you're well researched and you have a good question, the fighter will like it and probably give you a good answer. And there's your clip for TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, however you like to post your content.
Previously talking about Conor McGregor, have you been watching TUF 31?
I have been, I'm away right now, so I've been waking up in the morning just to watch this. First thing I watch. I have been enjoying it, but I think the season is going as I expected, and it's the veterans outclass. I mean, look at some of these veterans, like what was it, Austin Hubbard last night or the other night? Like, his 7 wins in the UFC. He's always going to beat someone who has no experience. Like that experience, even if they're 1-3 in the UFC, that experience holds so much weight. So I I think Connor might have made the mistake of picking all the rookies. I think it was understandable that he picked the rookies, but I think it would have been better if maybe he mixed the two up, if that makes sense.
Do you think Conor having the rookies, they're more likely to learn from him, looking up to him previously.
Yeah, well, I think that was Connor's mindset too, and I think it was a good mindset. Like, he can teach these guys something. But as I said before, that experience, so it's not a reflection of Connor's coach. I think Connor is a great coach, and he's coaching these athletes well. But then you look at the fighters that are on this veteran team. Timur Valiev should not have been cut, and he should not be on this thing. Brad Katona, former Ultimate Fighter winner, he is like my pick to win this whole show because he's got that experience of the Ultimate Fighter. He knows what it takes to win.
What's your thoughts on Conor McGregor's career recently, coming off two losses to Dustin Poirier and obviously the leg break?
Sorry, can you repeat that again? Sorry, there's like
Is that
it's like
what's your thoughts on like Conor McGregor's career coming off the two losses to Dustin Poirier and obviously the leg break?
well, the leg break was awful, and I remember watching that. I was in my room, and it was 7 a.m. and he steps back and breaks his leg. Like that was not fun to watch. And that's the thing. Honestly, if you asked me that 2 years ago when that happened, I would have said I don't expect Connor to come back. I didn't think he would be coming back because that is such a bad injury. And I feel like Connor is smart enough to know that. I think he's taking the smart route of taking the time off, because if you remember, Anderson Silva broke his leg and he was never the same. Chris Weidman hasn't fought in 2 years. He's going to fight in 2 months now. But, you know, if he's playing the smart, I would like to see him a little more in the gym. I think it's a mental block as well. Going back into the cage after snapping your leg, like that is a really tough mental hurdle to get through. So I think maybe that's in the back of his head and maybe that's putting him off. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I would like to see Connor get back into regular training. I don't think he's training yet, and that's why we haven't seen him in the USADA pool and getting ready for the Chandler fight.
Do you think the decline of Conor McGregor came after the Mayweather fight getting $100 million and having more money than he knows what to do with?
Yeah, I think that like you have that much money, and especially he sold part of Proper 12, so he's got so much money. And so I don't think it's a money thing. I've seen people saying, "Oh, UFC's not offering him enough." The UFC will offer as much money as they possibly can to Connor. They'll make Chandler fight for free if they really want this fight to be made. So money's not the question. But I think the motivation isn't as there as, the 2014 Connor or the 2013 Connor coming in off Cage Warriors who didn't have much money. But now he has all the money in the world. As he said years ago, like he can buy everyone his generational wealth that he does have now, like his kids that won't have to work if the money is kept right. So I think that's definitely a factor that the motivation maybe isn't as there.
Have you watched McGregor Forever, his new documentary?
I've watched the first episode. I was gonna watch more later on, but from what I saw in the Khabib fight, like that build up to the fight, like obviously they didn't show everything, but there were elements of that, like where we saw the Connor of old, and even with the Don Cerrone, I think we see the motivated, hungry Connor. That's kind of a meme now. Is he the motivated Connor, the and everything? But it is the truth, and I think the motivation needs to be there for him to fight Michael Chandler because Michael Chandler is the most dangerous lightweight in MMA right now.
How do you see that fight going if it eventually does go on and happen?
So for me, Chandler is the perfect matchup for Connor to come back in the way of if he does come back and he's not as ready, Chandler probably can knock him out, right? But if Connor's right and he's Chandler's the type of guy to walk into shots, and he's a guy, and he's maybe not got the durability as much anymore, and he's a guy Connor can put down and put away. So it's a perfect uh win-lose fight, and I think it's a very good matchup rather than coming in for a fight with Charles Oliveira or Beneil Dariush.
You got to think the first round of Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor is going to be electrifying. We've seen how both of them start fights.
The Oliveira fight.
No, the Michael Chandler, Conor McGregor, how both men in the first round are electric and how good it
Yeah,
will be.
that first round, I mean, that will be like two cars going in against each other at 100 miles per hour. That will be really awesome. I hope it happens. Right now, I read a report that he's got 48 hours to get into the USADA testing pool. Otherwise, that fight's not happening this year. So we have to look at that and see. I think they're gonna wait, and they're gonna wait for UFC 300 to do it. That card's gonna be March or April next year. I think if he's waiting this long, then they may as well put him on the biggest UFC card possible.
Well, that card's spearheaded by Conor McGregor. It'd probably break all of his numbers. You can't think the UFC would go all out for UFC 300 like they did for UFC 200 and 100.
UFC 300 is going to be so big, and so I think they're going to tactically play the next few title fights as well. Um, and by that I mean like the December card, the January card, the February card probably aren't going to be very big. They're not going to be stacked, and they're going to stack up this big card. So to me, you can expect more non-title pay-per-views um this year or early next year to build up this card because so many stars are coming back now. So many star champions are ready to fight again. Sean O'Malley versus Aljamain Sterling, that happened in August. They'll be ready by April. And I mean, whoever wins that, that's a big fight. Aljo potentially moving up. So you do Murad versus someone or who knows what. But like that card has potential to be so big. And I think that is how the UFC is going to play that. And I think who else better to put on the marquee on the top of the poster than Conor McGregor?
Do you think this will be the time where we finally see John Jones and Conor McGregor on the same card?
Well, I don't think so because those are the two biggest stars, and I think both of them don't want to give up the headlining spot. So I do think John Jones will fight soon. I think maybe the MSG card because he is in the testing pool. I think he does want to fight. I think it's more so maybe about Stipe and Stipe. He's been out for a long time since he got knocked out by Francis Ngannou, and he is older. He's what 39, 40. So it's a different thing, and so I'm thinking they're kind of like with Tyson Fury right now. They're trying to find how they split the money up, and then also when they can do it and when it fits into the schedule. But I do think they are paying attention to what Connor is up to right now.
Talking about Tyson Fury, what do you think about Dana White saying he would make Tyson Fury versus John Jones?
Yeah, I mean that would be fun, but I can't see any world where Tyson Fury comes to MMA, and I can't see any world where John Jones comes to boxing because, like, boxing isn't um John Jones' forte. Like Connor going to boxing, that kind of made sense, right? Because he could strike. His hands were his thing. But Tyson Fury, if that fight were to happen, John Jones takes him down. It'll look like the Cyril Gane fight. He will
Yeah.
take him down. And he'll submit him. Like it'll be quick.
Do you see Francis Ngannou eventually going into boxing after he signed with PFL?
Well, I saw a report before going on here, and he said the Wilder fight talks are progressing well. So that is a fight, I think, of all boxing fights for Ngannou, I think that's a fun one. And I think both guys, they're so powerful. Someone's going to sleep.
What do you
And
think?
sorry,
Go,
yeah.
carry on, finish.
No, you were starting to ask a question, so I
I
was
was going
done.
to say, how do you see like Ngannou match up against someone like Anthony Joshua, who we've seen in the past had chin been weakened?
Well, so Anthony Joshua is another one that I think Ngannou could have a decent amount of success with because maybe he's not as there anymore. I think his aura of invincibility that he has in his head, not necessarily by the media or by the fans, is gone. I think he has his own doubts. And even in his last fight, I wasn't impressed. It wasn't a very good performance. Um, maybe it's just him rebuilding, but we've seen him get cracked and how he reacted. He got cracked in his last fight. He didn't react well. So if a guy like Ngannou cracks him, he might be going to sleep. So that's an interesting one, but I do think Joshua has the experience and the boxing prowess to outbox Francis Ngannou relatively easily.
Talking about old Irish MMA with Conor McGregor recently, Ian Gary versus Jeff Neal got announced. How do you see that one going?
You know, oh man, I love that fight. I'm really excited when I saw it. And for me, I think Ian Gary wins it. Ian Gary is so good. I think early in his career, he had the weird debut where he was getting tagged, but then he got the kill shot. I think that was the debut nerves, and now we've seen him have some really complete, perfect performances. And that Daniel Rodriguez one was so good. His timing and everything was elite. And against a guy like Jeff Neal, who is going to stand and bang with him, I think he is the perfect opponent for Ian Gary to get into that top 10. Originally, I was surprised at first because I was like, well, doesn't he want to fight Neil Magny? He wants to fight another top 15 to 10 guy. But if he's willing to take that jump, and I think it's a good matchup for him to take that jump. It's not like he's going in fighting Shavkat Rakhmonov or Hamzat Shemaev or something.
You think Ian Gary is the future of that welterweight division? Obviously, Leon Edwards, being from the UK, is the current champion.
Oh, Ian Gary is 100% the future of the welterweight division. Him and Jack Della Maddalena are going to be the two stars of that division. I can't wait for them to fight. I think they'll be fighting for the title. You can mark my words on that one. Maybe I'll be completely wrong in 2 years. Maybe they'll both be cut and I'll look like a buffoon. But those two are so good. And I'm very excited for the Sean Brady fight. I do think Jack wins that as well. But those guys are so good, and those guys are the future. There's so many guys coming up the welterweight division now that are really good. I think we're starting to see now, Kamaru Usman, he's on a two-fight skid losing to Leon Edwards. And we're seeing, Jorge Masvidal retired. Gilbert Burns lost to Bilal Muhammad. I do think Bilal Muhammad you can consider in the next generation of welterweights, if that makes sense. Like he wasn't there with Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington, and Kamaru Usman. That was the three headline that road. And now we've got Shavkat and we've got Bilal and we've got Ian Gary, Jack Della Maddalena. I count Sean Brady in that bunch as well. Um, so it's a very exciting time for welterweights. Just can we get over the hurdle of them not fighting each other? Because it's really annoying when they don't fight each other. But I think if they all are fighting each other and they're all game, which is kind of, I think, what we're seeing now with Ian Gary, especially, he's game to fight anyone. It's a great time to be a welterweight fan.
One of the stars of the new and upcoming welterweights, Hamzat Chimaev, been calling for the fight against Kamaru Usman. How do you see that one going if it does get matched up?
I think it depends on what Kamaru Usman we get because the Kamaru Usman in London, we saw maybe a little bit of his age. And I hate to say that about fighters and I hate being that guy, but he wasn't taking shots as well. Obviously, it's a different matchup than a perfect striker like Leon Edwards and a great wrestler like Hamzat Shemaev. I think it could end up looking like a Gilbert Burns, Hamzat Shemaev kind of fight where both guys are good grapplers. So, you know, Kamaru Usman is a very good wrestler. He's gonna compete with Hamzat Shemaev on the ground. So we'll be standing bang. Hamzat's powerful. Usman's powerful. We've seen both guys get cracked and see how they react to getting cracked. Hamzat isn't invincible. I think the Gilbert Burns fight showed that. And neither is Kamaru Usman anymore. We saw him lose to Leon Edwards and we saw him get cracked again by Leon Edwards with that knee in London. So it's a very interesting fight. I think Kamaru Usman definitely can win, but I am leaning Hamzat Shemaev, but I can see Kamaru Usman winning.
What was your thoughts on that main event, Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman, UFC London pay-per-view?
That was a very clear win for Leon Edwards. I don't know. I mean, it was relatively close, but I don't know how people were saying it was a robbery because it really wasn't. And the home field advantage, people saying, if it took place in America, it would have been given to Kamaru Usman. If so, that would have been a massive robbery, like no joke. So yeah, it was a clear win for Leon Edwards, and he looked good. And I'm excited to see him versus Covington.
I think I had that fight scored as a draw. Obviously, Leon getting that point deduction in the third round, I think it was, hurt him when it came to the scorecards.
I scored it 48-46, so I scored it for 4 rounds for Leon Edwards personally. But it was a closer fight, and it could have been 3-2. And I understand where you're coming from with the draw, but to me, it was a Leon Edwards win for sure.
Obviously, UFC London coming back in July 22nd. Will you be there attending the fight?
I will be there. I got my tickets from Nathaniel, and I will be there. I will be covering Cage Wars the night before. Very excited about that. And then yeah, I'll be there for the fights. I won't be covering it. I wish I was. That's something to look out for. I might be covering a UFC event later this year. Fingers crossed. But yeah, very excited for UFC London. It's not as stacked of a card, I think, for the maybe casual fan. Maybe the price isn't for some of the tickets isn't fair for maybe the card we're getting, but I think there are some really, really good fights on that card.
Well,
Nathaniel Wood, Feely is a great fight. Lerone Murphy, Coulibaly is a great fight. The main event is a fun one too. Like there's some really good fights across this card. I think if they can get the bout order right, then they've nailed it. I think it's a perfectly good fight night.
it hurts the UK fans, Paddy the Baddy being injured. Someone like Mohammed Mukayev looks like he's injured too. So it hurts the card order and having them two stars out.
Yeah, I mean, originally it was going to be looked at doing a pay-per-view, and Colby Covington was talking about it being a pay-per-view, but Leon didn't want to fight in London again. Muhammad Makayev, last time out didn't look as impressive as maybe I thought he would be against a debuting fighter. Got the finish with the torn knee. That was very impressive. They stuck around and survived that knee bar. But yeah, I mean, it's still a good card despite no um Leon Edwards and no Muhammad Makayev. Muhammad Makayev is looking at the Boston card, I think.
Well, you talked previously about your relationship with Nathaniel Wood, how he got you tickets for UFC London. You're currently wearing a Prospects Apparel hat, and your show, Patrick McCory Sports Show, is sponsored by Prospects Apparel. How did that come about?
So I had a piece of Prospect Apparel before the sponsorship even happened. I just really like the shirt, and it's very good for working out. And I sound like I'm running an ad now, but it's it really is really good. And I interviewed him in March, and then he got injured, and that was before he was meant to fight no, Leodvik
Leon
Shalinian.
Murphy.
Uh, no, Leodvik Shalinian at bantamweight, and then he pulled out. Um, with I think, oh, no, everyone pulled out instead of him, and then he decided to move up. He fights Rosa, and then he fights Jourdain. I had him on after he fought Jourdain, and then so I said to him, before the interview, I would like to talk to you about something afterward, and then he stuck around after the interview, and I said, your clothing brand is really good, and I think it deserves to get more eyes. So would you like maybe someone who has a little bit of a following to get more eyes on it? And I'll wear it in the thing. All I ask is, I don't want a payment. Or, I mean, payment would have been great, but I'm not asking for that. If you can send me the new drops, like they just sent me the three new caps that are really, really awesome. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And him and Andrew sorted that out, and they've sent me the stuff, and I wear it in all my content now. It's really
Do you
great.
think do you think it's important for someone like Nathaniel Wood, who's a fighter, to have relationships with maybe an MMA journalist and an MMA fan like yourself?
So I got that when I originally signed. People were like, "Well, hey, you shouldn't have that kind of relationship with a fighter." I was like, "Why not?" Like, I'm not outwardly showing bias in any way. It's not like I'm going on and saying, Nathaniel's going to be this, Nathaniel's going to be that, Nathaniel whoops this guy. I'm not being like that. I like Nathaniel a lot, and he is a very, very good fighter, one of my favorites. But I don't show that bias, and I think that's the difference, and where it's more so me and Nathaniel are friends, and it's not a fighter bias. It's not a fighter trying to buy a journalist out. If Nathaniel did something controversial, I would say something about it. But Nathaniel, I don't think is that guy to do anything controversial. So I think he's a good dude, and he's a friend of mine, and I'm, him supporting me, and I'm supporting his clothing brand, and of course I'm supporting his fights as well.
I had Nathaniel Wood on here, and he said in 10 years he wants to carry on fighting and be a world champion. Do you think he can reach that goal of being a world champion?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I think my AirPods are cutting out. I'm just gonna take them off and just change
Yeah,
the
okay.
speaker real quick.
I had Nathaniel Wood on here, and he said in 10 years he wants to be a UFC world champion. Do you think he can achieve that goal?
I think he can be a champion. He's so talented, and he's got the right mindset as well. He's very smart when it comes to his fighting career and how he fights. And he's not gonna go into a fight with a torn knee. He's not gonna do anything stupid. I think that's where he has an advantage over some guys in that featherweight division. It's so stacked, but also kind of open in a way because some of the like the welterweight division, some of the older guys are falling back now. And if Nathaniel gets a big win in UFC London, definitely can get a ranking fight, and then he's in there. You know, And there's so much talent with the featherweight division, young talent. Ilya Topuria, he fights Josh Emmett in a couple of weeks, and Arnold Allen just fought Max Holloway. Just to name a few, Movsar Evloev, and a bunch of unranked talent too.
Someone like Arnold Allen, do you think he's a bit unfortunate that only recently he got the shot against Max Holloway? But if you're a fan of MMA, you know he's been putting in the hard yards for the last 3 or 4 years, but it's not a loudmouth on the mic. Kind of like Leon Edwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think British talent is through the roof right now. Coming up from Cage Warriors as well. Like Tom Aspinall is amazing. I think it's a really good time for British MMA fans, and you don't just have Michael Bisping now. You have Leon Edwards, you have Arnold Allen. Those are two household names. Aspinall's making a name for himself as well now. Coming back off the knee injury, that he's going to get a big pop from the crowd. Um, Lerone Murphy and Nathaniel Wood, I know they have their beef and stuff, but they're the future of British MMA. And there's a lot of Cage Warriors talent. George Hardwick, Harry Hardwick, and so many guys coming up. It's a very good time to be a British fan.
Do you think that's a head-on collision, Leon Murphy versus Nathaniel Wood?
That's a fight I think is inevitable. Um, and it's just about when they can find the time. Nathaniel did say he asked for Lerone, and Lerone took the Kulabau fight. So that's an interesting development. I do think if they both get a big win in July, we could see them fighting each other. Or they both have a ranking fight and then they fight each other. So I think that fight is inevitable. That happens unless one. I think if one of them loses in London, that uh makes it less likely.
You got to think if they both keep winning, they will eventually get their shot to go against each other. And hopefully, for as a UK fan, it will be on a London card.
I mean, could you imagine two English fighters headlining the English card? That would be insane, and I think the crowd would go nuts. But then you have to look at where do you play it because Lerone himself, he's from Manchester, and Nathaniel's from London. So if you put that in London, it's going to be a Nathaniel pro crowd. Put it in Manchester, it's going to be or Manchester or Liverpool, it's going to be a Lerone heavy crowd. So I think if the UFC can play it right, if they want to put it in Britain, I think maybe they look for a more neutral place. I don't know if you can really find a neutral place between those two with a big venue, but if they can do that and if they can build that fight right, that could be a main event in 2 years easily.
They could always go to like somewhere like Sheffield or Glasgow and make it as a main event on a fight night.
Sorry?
They could always take it to Sheffield or somewhere like Glasgow, a big city, and then make it a main event on a fight night.
Yeah, it would be a main event on a fight night if they play it right, and also if they're well into the rankings, or like a big co-main event on an English pay-per-view if Leon still has his title.
You recently watched the UFC Canada event with Charles Oliveira getting an impressive win over Beneil Dariush.
Oh man, Oliveira is so good, and I had my doubts for the Beneil matchup. I didn't love the Beneil matchup at first because Beneil is very good grappler, he's very smart. But what stood out to me, and I think stood out in that fight as well, like I thought it beforehand, Oliveira has a clear edge on the feet. And I looked at the power of Beneil, and it's like the one shot power. And I think Oliveira did a great job of avoiding that and landing his own before Beneil could even get a big shot off. And Oliveira, I mean, he did what he had to do. And I think if he didn't get that, and let's say he did that in the second round, he wouldn't be calling for the title shot. And he probably would be, but he wouldn't have as good of a shot at it. But now getting a knockout win over I want to say number three ranked guy. I mean, outside of the winner of Poirier Gaethje, who is more deserving?
And it's probably one Oliveira fight in the last 3 or 4 where he hasn't been wobbled and rocked early on.
Yeah, I mean that was definitely something I expected to see. I expected him to get popped a couple times, but he fought really smart, and maybe that's because he got the LASIK surgery on his eyes that he can actually see now. Maybe he was able to avoid the shots, but I think he just fought smarter. It was a controlled chaos, and that's why I like to call Gaethje's fighting style as well. And it's the style where he can have the fun, have the crazy fights, and the fan friendly style, but also fight smart. And I think we saw that with Gaethje's fight against Fiziev last March, and we saw it again here with Beneil Dariush.
Going from Charles Oliveira and Justin Gaethje, obviously you're an MMA journalist, but how do you get into the sport?
How I got into the sport.
Yeah,
It's a very basic answer, and that is I got sucked in the Conor versus Khabib beef. And I'm young, I'm only 18, so I've been into the sport for a while now. But yeah, it was a basic answer. It wasn't like, my dad was watching it for so long and I was born into it. Not like football, like you see the Liverpool shirt on. That's the sport I was born into and love. But yeah, I fell in love with that, and then like I would watch the pay-per-views. I would watch really just the main cards, and I watched the occasional fight night, but I wasn't as big of a fan until honestly the pandemic hit and there was no other sport to watch, and there was no school, no nothing. So I sat up and I watched these cards, and that's where really I fell in love, and I started the show in August of 2020.
that's what Dana White did such a good job of. During the pandemic, the only sport going around, Fight Island, big pay-per-view cards, big fight night cards, every card was pretty much stacked to the brim.
The card what? Sorry.
Every
Sorry,
card was
I
pretty much
can't.
stacked.
The fight that really like sucked me in, you mean?
No, like every card during the pandemic was either a pay-per-view or fight night was stacked with headliners all over it.
Oh yeah, no, there were great fights during the pandemic. Darren Till Whitaker is one that I think was underappreciated in that time. The pay-per-view, that first pay-per-view in Jacksonville, headlined by Gaethje and Ferguson, that was great. So it's about I think they did a really good job of capitalizing on there was no other sport to rival them. There was no boxing, there was no football, there was no NFL. Either way, the NFL season wasn't going then, but it was just a very smart play by the UFC to build their Fight Island, and they did those cards, and I think that really helped the popularity of the UFC for sure, for the cat to the casual fans and the mainstream public.
What's the end goal of being an MMA journalist? Is it to work for someone like BT Sports and ESPN in America?
Yeah, I mean, America is the goal, but like for me, it's not. While for me, and this is something to say for everyone going into this, look at the short term, but also look at the long term. So, maybe you'll say, "Oh, I missed the opportunity to interview such and such," but in the long run, you could be somewhere, and then you get that interview. So for me, the goal is definitely to get to America. I would love to be in the Vegas kind of area because that's the fight capital of the world. But I'm not rushing to get there. I know how expensive it is to fly from Germany to Vegas and just to anywhere in America. So um right now I'm building my base, I'm building my foundation, and looking at the UFC is looking for European cards, and the Paris one coming up. I'm looking at that maybe as an option to cover if things come to fruition. But so it's about finding your opportunities that you can get and not rushing. I think that's the thing for me. So what I always say, and I've said this to a lot of people, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you know, you see maybe another journalist friend of yours maybe has more followers than you. Who cares? Like you're doing great work. Like for me, like I don't have a huge amount of followers, but then you look, I've worked with Brett Okamoto and I've worked with Paddy Pimblett and a lot of big fighters, but I only have 800 followers on Instagram. Like I'm not, look at the numbers. Like sure, numbers are nice, numbers are pretty. Trust me, when I see 10,000 views on an Instagram reel, I'm like, oh heck yeah. But that's that's not what you're supposed to look for. Build your foundation up, and that's something for all people trying to get into MMA media. Build your foundation, and then you can find opportunities, and opportunities will find you. Like I've gotten so many opportunities just to me, and I haven't even been looking for them.
Well, to finish off, Patrick, I've got some UFC fights name in front of me. We're going to play a bit of word association. First word, first phrase that comes to your mind.
Sorry, it was a little like bubbly or something. I couldn't
Ah,
hear.
I was just saying, to finish up, I've got some UFC fights name in front of me. We play a bit of word association. First word, first phrase that comes into your mind.
Where I think, sorry, I'm struggling to hear you
Ah,
fully.
I would,
I'm using like my normal computer setting. I think I don't know. I can't fully understand that question.
I was just saying, to finish up, we'll play a bit of word association.
I'm feeling here. I feel bad.
Nah, it's
Um,
all good, bro. Well, thank you for coming on, Patrick. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
I'm really struggling. It's I think is it the AirPods mic that you're using?
I'm not too sure. It normally works fine.
Okay, try again, and I'll try and listen a little better.
Well, I was just saying, thank you for coming on, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
No, I'm not getting it. I feel really bad. This is really bad.
Well, Patrick, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, anytime. I love talking, and I can talk forever. So anytime you want to talk, and if if any journalists listen to this, maybe I didn't give great messages, but if you need any advice or anything, message me, please. Like, I may not have big following, but I can help. I can
Yeah,
help. I know what to do. I know how to grow a base. I know how to message fighters and appeal to their ego. And I think that's a big thing, appealing to the fighter's ego, because that is a big part of this sport.
you truly appreciate that. Thank you so much.
No problem.